us out now, I think, yeah. Got an intimate group, so that's cool. So I'm gonna introduce myself, and then we'll go this way, and then Amirah has something she's gonna say before we start the panel itself. So you should have on your table, kind of just like the structure of the panel. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a discussion, and then we're gonna kind of have a room discussion with that involves more of you. And then we're gonna kind of come back to the panel in case they have any additional kind of thoughts or things you want to discuss that are brought up by the larger room. And it'll be kind of a flow. The last one I ran, we just kind of chatted as a whole room, so we can kind of do that too. So, my name is Nate Erwin. I'm the Director of Food Sovereignty at the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust, which is an indigenous land trust of the Pocasset Wampanoag tribe based in Rhode Island, southeast Rhode Island, and the south coast of Massachusetts. We provide supports to farmers across New England-ish, depending on which state we're talking about. And we do a ton of other things. If you're interested, I can talk about that for a long time, but I'm not going to talk about that for a long time now. Instead, I'm going to sort of transition to each one of our panelists. They'll introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. I want you to turn your attention to the definitions on the sheet. In case you're not familiar with any of these terms, I'm going to read them to you. I know you can read, but I just want to give a little time to do that too. So these were definitions that we came up with as a panelist group, and they are imperfect, but that is okay. So sovereignty is the right of an individual or community to self-governance and self-determination. Seed keeping is the process by which growers collect and replant seeds that are open pollinated rather than coming from one of the large evil corporations. The practice of seed keeping is a quiet act of resistance. It's a step towards food sovereignty and a way to protect our cultures. Seed sovereignty itself is the right of a farmer to save, use, exchange, and sell his or her or their own seeds. The primary issue that seed sovereignty seeks to address is the ownership of seeds. And do we really own anything? Ownership of seeds, as a larger majority of seeds are becoming property of, again, the corporations. Seed rematriation, the root being mother, or rematriation, is the return of seeds to a person, community, or tribe with a direct relationship to those seeds based on seed collection information. And that information can take various forms. And then the food system, I think we should all know what the food system is, but I'm not going to shame you if you don't know, is a complex network that includes all the inputs and outputs associated with agricultural food and food production and consumption. So basically all things food related. Okay, now you know. If you didn't know, now you do. Okay, so I'm going to turn to Bill. We'll move this way, and then Nataka, and then Amirah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Braun.
Hi, Bill.
Hi. I'm a farmer in Westport, Massachusetts, nearby Ivory Silo Farm, seedkeeper, co-founder. Hi, sweetie, you want to come in?
Yeah.
All ages.
0 and up.
These are for everyone.
Yeah. Also, co-founder and executive director of Freed Seed Federation. So we're a farmer-based nonprofit focused on place-based seeds for the people. So we work on preservation of rare, culturally relevant varieties to our bioregion. We do adaptation of seed crops, and we also focus on diversification, so breeding new varieties for the public domain, free of proprietary ownership. Fortunate to have Sefra join us on the board, and Hannah is the intelligent one that gives us credibility on our organization as our senior scientist. So
Thanks, Anna. Pressure.
grateful to be in conversation with them and with Nataka and Amirah as well.
I am Sefra Alexandra. Pronouns are she, her. I come from the unceded land of the Pocasset Golden Hill tribe in Connecticut in the Long Island Sound. It's a beautiful place known as Matchmugs, which means literally the beautiful land. And growing up with reverence for all the seeds that have been there since I was growing up, and hopefully that will exist there forever is kind of the joy that I bring to this work. I call myself the seed huntress because I thought botany needs a little marketing because people outside of this world are like, who cares about seed conservation? So with that kind of nomenclature that I gave myself, I've been doing work around the globe, helping groups globally, internationally in disaster zones, nationally in this country, then eco-regionally, figure out different strategies and listen to what they needed to help them be able to have their own seed sovereignty and all the different ways that that looks like in those different global skills. So I'm really excited to be here. And thanks to Nate for getting us all rallied together.
Hurting facts. My name is Hannah, and I am a self-proclaimed seed nerd. I have been really entranced with seeds all of my life. My mother was a big influence on me at an early age, so I was brought up with the concept of heirloom seeds in central Maine in 1978, planting tomatillos and wondering where did tomatillos come from. So I've just been fascinated with seeds and their connection to food and culture and cultural identity all of my life, from childhood through adulthood. And I think that's all you need to know for the context of this family.
Nataka, go ahead.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
First, hello and welcome everybody. Glad to be here. So my name is Nataka Crayton, and I like to say that I'm a lover. I'm a grower, a farmer, and I geek out totally on seeds. So saving seeds. So I love to save seeds. I have my own seed library, not quite looking to, do it on a mad scale. I kind of leave that up to Amirah with Sistah Seeds and everybody else who's on the panel and some folks who are in the audience. Just briefly, I've had a very robust agricultural experience here in the city of Boston, both in helping move the ag movement through Article 89 to get it popping. But before that, we had already been on ground, in the ground, through a village at work, teaching young people how to grow their own food and start their own business. And then soon after that, it evolved into us getting involved. And I say us, which is, I always have to put my husband, Bobby Walker, in there. We were a part of City Growers, which is one of Boston's first urban ag, as the term was not used then, urban ag enterprise in Boston. And then it moved from there to us being instrumental in co-creating the Urban Farming Institute. And yeah, I grow, I have a seed library and that's the extent of, this, but I love to try new varieties. I love to say the seeds that I love, and I mostly enjoy sharing it, growing it, and feeding people. So again, welcome and glad to be here. Amirah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amirah. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I am a farmer and a seed keeper in Pennsylvania. And I really focus my work on growing, saving, and sharing seeds from the African diaspora, especially from my own heritage as an African American, but also Afro-Caribbean and West African cultural crops. I sell my work with seeds online at Sistah Seeds. That's my farm. And I also do a lot of community education, teaching others how to save seed and become a seed keeper of the crops that are most important to them. All right. Should I just jump in then?
Amirah's going to give a little framing for the panel before we start.
All right, great. Very small disclaimer. I'm not an expert in some of these topics, but I am a practitioner, and so just wanted to give you that that little disclaimer. I'm not an academic, I am a farmer.
Academics aren't always
But I
right.
wanted to give you guys a little bit of context for the issue of seed sovereignty that we're going to be discussing. Again, the definition is the right of a farmer to save, use, exchange, and sell his or her own seeds. And as a term, seed sovereignty was coined by La Via Campesina, which is the global movement for indigenous and peasant farmers. It was coined in the early 2000s, which was a really critical time, given that's when a lot of the large corporations really ramped up to a very extreme degree their efforts to privatize our seed. And so La Via Campesina developed this term in order to assert the need for communities to self-determine their own food systems in the wake of all of this privatization and biopiracy. And the seed sovereignty movement was born from the food sovereignty movement, which is also headed by La Via Campesina. And before we get into a deeper conversation here, I wanted everyone to be aware that seed sovereignty, food sovereignty, land sovereignty, etc., are all pieces within this broader issue of cultural political sovereignty that marginalized and exploited communities have been fighting for hundreds of years. This issue that we're discussing today, this modern issue of corporate control over our food system, is just the latest iteration of this power structure that strips power away from people and communities, along with colonialism, along with slavery, along with apartheid, that strips power away from people, that strips away their self-determination, their land, their seeds, their culture, their language. And with all of these unjust systems, it's the people of the global South that suffer first and suffer most, but we're ultimately all affected. We're all made powerless by this system. And sovereignty is about taking that power back. Seed sovereignty is about taking our seeds back. And that means something a little bit different to each of us. So.
Beautiful.
Well, we shall conclude.
And that's it. You don't need to know anything else. Additional framing to, so Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust, Emily and I actually took a class with the same professor, who connected me to Rural Coalition. And Rural Coalition is an alliance, I'll just read from their website. Farmers, farm workers, indigenous, migrant, and working people working together towards a new society. That includes food sovereignty. So at the Land Trust, we're a member of that organization. It's an American chapter of La Via Campesina, as is the National Family Farm Coalition as well. And then we're also in partnership with the Land Workers Alliance, which is a UK-based organization of similar means and approaches. So it's international, but it's hyper local at the same time, and as is seed sovereignty and what you're about to hear. So, okay. There are seeds. Look at that. Check it out. And I think an appropriate time maybe to kind of share those will be when we turn to the audience. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to continue to ground the conversation briefly. Among the seeds that are up here too are two different strains of corn. You can see there's an 8-row open corn there, a white capflint corn, and then red corn here. These are two of the oldest strains of corn grown in Turtle Island. This is Pocasset corn and a Narragansett corn that have been in place for thousands of years. So we brought these among other seeds as a way to sort of ground the conversation and hold us all accountable. Think about seeds as living beings, seeds with whom we've had a relationship for millennia, that we are co-evolving our relationship together. So everything we say in this room tonight is accountable to the seeds we see right here, and we encourage you to come interact with them when the time is right.
I'd love to have a few of those seeds.
Got it. Mailing address.
Hold the chat. All right. Yeah, put it in the chat. You also have each other's emails now. All right. So first question is, what are the benefits of seed keeping, which itself is not seed sovereignty, but we'll differentiate those two a little bit. So the questions I ask are to the whole panel. Just if you can just speak here. Nataka and Amirah, if you have something to say, feel free to either put your hand up or just speak, whatever works best. And And again, the questions asked by the audience at any point should be directed to the whole panel, not to the individual. Because, both from like a collective standpoint, but also you never know who has the right answer. Or not that there's a right answer, but the answer that you're hoping for. Okay, so question is, what are the benefits of seed keeping broadly?
Anyone want to break the ice?
The first
I mean, since you're already going, you might as well.
You want to say something first?
I was gonna say that the first thing that strikes me in my soul when I see this question, the words written on a piece of paper, the benefits of seed keeping is embracing the responsibility of really caring for this organism that nurtures us. And the more nourishment we put into that organism, when you're growing plants that you're going to collect seed from, you're involved in that every aspect of that plant's life cycle from, well, for the most part, if you're dealing with annuals and biennials, from sowing that seed and cultivating that plant and supporting it through every stage of its life into the end stages of its life and its senescence and its final gift of these seeds that you carry forth to plant another generation of. And you get to know these plants. And you get to know these plants as a collective population, but you get to know these plants as they are part of the community of plants and animals that you might tend in your gardens or your farm or wherever you're growing these plants. And you do get to know these plants. You know that if it's planted over here, it might want this and it needs that. And it might respond this way to, if you do something. So having the gift of being able to know these plants to me is like this intrinsic benefit. And I could say it's a very selfish benefit, but it's more of just this huge connection to these seeds that I'm going to keep going and passing along to other people. And just that it's reciprocal, but in multi dimensions.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. I would add to that too, that there's an intimacy and a spiritual component to seed, and there's also a practical component to seed keeping, which is when you save a seed in place, the seed learns and the seed teaches you too. So a seed quite literally adapts as you're saving it in place. It gets to know its soils, it gets to know pests and diseases, the localized climate, it gets to know your harvesting styles, the way in which you're caring for the plant, what your personal preferences are. This is what humans have done for millennia. So there are very practical benefits to seed keeping. The spiritual is also incredibly important, and there's no way to not fall into seed intimacy when you've gotten to know a plant from its entirety of its life cycle. But also when you're thinking about how do we reduce inputs on our farm or our garden? How do we stop using pesticides? How do we have better adaptive varieties? How do we have varieties or seeds that we're working with that our community is in control of, and that a multinational doesn't dictate what we can and cannot grow and who can save and not save that seed? These are very practical benefits of seed keeping that are obviously complementary, to say the least, to the spiritual components of seed keeping too. It puts it back into the community control that we're going to get into.
Other thoughts? If it's
Sure, I'll go. So I really, as I first started gardening and I was introduced to via a workshop that me and my husband did, that not only could we grow seeds, and this was during a time like in March where, most people aren't, gardeners in particular are not planting until after, what's the day, Memorial or?
Memorial Day weekend, yeah.
Yeah. So, we defy rules all the time. So we were like, okay, not only are we going to plant, but then we learned that we could save seeds. So I was just excited. I didn't have no real thoughts about how I could save money, though I do save money. But mostly just that I get to save the seeds that I of the plant from the plants that I grew. And so that was very exciting for me. So, knowledge is power. and in addition to knowledge, knowing that there are platforms in which you can learn is also power, which I, put in totally in the realm of sovereignty. And yes, so I think that, let's see, I did have something else written. Oh, and I love sharing. So, for me, that, saving seeds and being able to share those seeds can certainly get into technicalities around, testing out those seeds. Like I grew okra seeds that were like 9 years old, red okra. And I think someone on the panel is that's their favorite thing to grow. Is you, Amirah?
Yeah.
So I do love growing okra too. So I did, and they germinated, and maybe not at a higher rate or an optimal rate that when I first saved the seed, but then also amaranth. So amaranth, the one that I love is called callaloo, and it's phenomenal. It's high in all kinds of great omegas and all that stuff. So I every year I grow it. I introduced it to the Urban Farming Institute, and they grow it, and I just keep growing it, and then I give it to the cab driver who just dropped me off. So I love to share. Yeah, so that's the benefit, I feel is of seed saving, keeping.
I want to add, though I have very little to add to every beautiful thing that was said, that seed keeping also has this very tangible benefit in that not every seed is available through a seed catalog. Not everything that's important to you that you would like to grow is going to be made available to you by a company, right? Like what's available if you pick up all of the popular seed catalogs is just a very small portion of the amount of beautiful crop diversity that's out there, that's been cultivated and passed down for generations through so many hands and communities. And so for me, one of the benefits of seed keeping is being able to build these relationships with seeds that I would have never otherwise been able to build relationships with, right? And it's about being able to bring some of these seeds, some of these crops back into my community where maybe they haven't been part of people's families in many generations, right? And so, especially when you are part of a marginalized community and the seeds and crops that are most important to you may not be most important to, the seed companies. Seed keeping, saving the seeds, going to the swaps and swapping seeds with my neighbors, with my family, with people in other places, that you can access seeds and relationships and stories that you can't find anywhere else but through this communal practice of seed keeping. So
But can I just add one thing to that? So like Amirah is saying, when you hold a seed in your hand, you look at it in a living, breathing embryo, right? Seeds are alive. And you realize that represents an unbroken chain of seed keepers for all of those that have come before us, for all of those that come after us. And we have that amazing and beautiful responsibility to make sure that that diversity stays there, right? And so when we join in this seed keeping tradition and remembering these arts of seed saving, then you're like high-fiving the chipmunks and the birds and like the ants and like everyone who is helping to proliferate this diversity, because it's not just us that are seed keepers, right? Those seeds, the native seeds, are planting the food for the forest. And if you think about seed keeping on all sorts of different levels, like eco-regionally, we want to make sure that we're keeping seeds of this place so that the heirlooms of the pollinators and the heirlooms of our wild friends, those exist, right? And then we go into disaster zones and in community seed banks. Those seed keepers are keeping their seeds because when their fields are wiped out, they need to be able to replant their fields immediately and be able to feed their families. And in subsistence farming nations, your seeds are your lifeline, right? And then you go on a global scale and you look at, I know some people, it seems contentious, but like these global seed banks, when everything else is wiped out. Now there's seed keepers for if and when there's wars where people bomb your seed banks or your fields are destroyed, that they're keeping those seeds so that we can rebreed the food crops of our planet, right? And so this is something that everyone up until a couple hundred years ago did. And so it's just rejoining this beautiful dance of the ecology that surrounds us.
Right. Farmer and plant breeder were synonymous with one another until about a century ago.
Found myself nodding a lot during the first question. Okay, so that's seed keeping, but you also included seed sovereignty. How would you define, what's the difference between those two? Or how does seed keeping move towards seed sovereignty?
I think we're all.
Yeah, I mean, go. If you want to say something, just say something. It's okay.
The people that are
I'll
keeping.
go
I
ahead.
could,
Really make
Go,
it-
you go, you go.
I was gonna say, I could stumble through this one if you're
Stumble.
patient with me.
Let's all stumble together.
Yeah.
Right. So, I've been farming for a pretty long time, since 2007. But it wasn't until much later that I ever saved a seed, that someone opened my eyes to the fact that that was possible. And for me, when I've been farming, one thing that I was really raised to believe is that everything I do in service of my community. So when I'm a teacher, I'm a teacher in service to my community. And when I'm a farmer in service to my community. So I don't have a fully fleshed out answer here, but the reason I started seed keeping was all in service of my community. So it was all in service of this seed sovereignty. I was at a conference back in, I think, 2011. And I had this conversation with Ben Burkett from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives at the time. And we had been talking about, Monsanto and all of these seed industry issues. And as a young farmer, who had already been farming for many years before that, I wanted to know, how can I use this knowledge to help my community? How can I farm in a way that's giving back to my community? And so it was through this conversation with Ben Burkett that I was inspired to get involved with seed keeping, because he told me, there aren't that many people that look like us in this industry, in this world, who are out saving seeds that our community wants and prioritizes and needs. And so everything that I do with my seed keeping work, I view in service of this greater seed sovereignty that I'm aspiring to for my community. All the seeds that come into my hands, that I'm able to grow out, I'm able to give back. And that is helping rebuild some of that seed sovereignty that my community has lost through time. I belong to African American communities, right? Our history starts, our history, has this really dark period in which my ancestors were taken off of their land, taken away from their home, from their culture, from their foods, from their seeds, and forcibly relocated and forced to work under the conditions of slavery. And in that era, in that process, the slavery, the settler colonialism, all of that has removed a lot from my community. But there's also really wonderful things that have been retained, that have been saved. And so I seek out those seeds that my community has been able to retain, to save, pass through the generations, and give them back, bring them back to my community, and help, I hope, us regain some sense of autonomy in our own food system again, in our own communities again, and taking back some of that which was taken and which was lost. So, man, I've been farming for a long time, and seed keeping for a portion of that. But for me, seed keeping, as soon as I began, it was this aha moment of a way that I could give back meaningfully to my community through an act as simple as saving a seed. Sorry for the journey.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I'm gonna just ask a question of the audience real quick. Raise your hand if you saved a seed before. Good job.
Right.
Okay, so
We
you
got
all,
multiple-
yeah, give yourselves a round of applause, okay. Let's, I'm just kind of curious of people's experiences,
Yeah.
we're gonna engage you a little bit more in a different way, but, continue on that trajectory that Amirah just laid down.
Hard to add. That was beautiful, Amirah. Thank you. And also how eloquently you laid out that seed sovereignty is hinged to food sovereignty, to land sovereignty, to ultimately reinventing and reimagining power structures. That's what sovereignty is. Individual or a community responsible for their own things, not owning, but controlling. When seed sovereignty is practiced in the community is in control of what you grow. And the community is in control of decisions that are made around what we eat and how we're able to feed ourselves and who is able to grow seeds and who's not. So there is a troubling rise that I think lends context to why seed sovereignty matters so much in this moment, as it's always mattered. It fundamentally is about breaking and reinventing power structures, but the rise of intellectual property in seeds right now is at an unprecedented pace. And a lot of times when you open up a seed catalog, you don't see that. You might not even know that a certain seed variety that you love to grow is patented. But behind the scenes, there are restrictions on who can grow those seeds, who can save those seeds, who can use those seeds. And so seed sovereignty is a direct answer to these forms of patents and proprietary ownership that dictate seeds being a commodity that is owned and controlled by usually vertically integrated multinational corporations. 4 companies own close to 3/4 of the world's seed supply through one means or another intellectual property. That's the moment that we're living in right now. And that's why seed sovereignty matters. It matters for all the reasons that Amirah laid out, but it also matters because those of us who are working with the land, who have the privilege of accessing land, need to be the ones who are making the decisions of who grows what and who cares for the plants and how we grow those plants. And that is all something that needs to be determined by a community and not handed down to us by any particular seed catalog or any multinational entity. So I just want to add that component to what was already said, because I think it's crucial for us to ground our understanding that the underpinnings of this is ultimately not just that your favorite variety will disappear from seed catalog, but the restrictions on who can grow seed, who can save seed, who can use seed is exponentially on the rise. It's not just varieties that are classically bred that are now patented, which is a whole violation on life that we won't get into in this conversation, but it's traits of varieties. It's the way the varieties are bred. It's the progeny of those varieties for the duration of the patent. All those things are utility patents, where if you as an independent plant breeder or a seed keeper stumble upon a particular hue of red in the electromagnetic spectrum of lettuce, you can be sent to court by a multinational because you violated a patent infringement for something that Mother Nature gave us.
Can you define proprietary ownership?
Proprietary gifts, thank you. Thank you for holding me accountable to definitions. We throw a lot out. Proprietary ownership, intellectual property. There's not enough time right now for the entire canon, but basically 1980, Diamond v. Chakrabarty, court case where a genetically engineered bacterium that was engineered to clean up oil spills was a 5-4 Supreme Court ruling to be patented. It was the first time that life had been patented. From that point on, it's been a slippery slope in terms of how life can be patented. Until 1980, that was off limits. It was not even, it was a non-starter in the Supreme Court that life could be patented. But we had a series of unfortunate, to say the least, slippery slopes to that point where proprietary ownership can be something like a bag tag, where, you know, if you have a piece of software and you open up that piece of software, there's a little sticker on there that says, you have the right to use this in accordance with blah, 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 but you can't do all these things with it. Those bag tags are on seed too. This is not just patented varieties we're talking about. It's also heirloom varieties that are owned by a large seed house that's under the umbrella of a multinational. And you never see that because it never gets transferred to the consumer. So there are all sorts of restrictions, even on things that we think are just in the public domain, like heirlooms, for example, that we never see. Proprietary ownership is any company or entity that's dictating that they own seeds as a commodity and that they can control who grows them and who doesn't. I think that's the most straightforward way of saying it.
Can I just add that there are people that are serving years, like decades in prison over like taking Monsanto seeds. Like I'll throw them straight out. Like basically Monsanto owns the patent on specifically the potato that's grown for laced potato chips. Scientists got caught, and it's not even proven that he was a spy or anything like that. Got caught with some of these like in his pocket. Literally 40 plus years in prison over a handful of seeds. And like, so if you think it's like a joke, it's
no joke.
It's very, very serious business.
Amen. And we in the US, comparably speaking, are fortunate. There are communities elsewhere in the world who have had their seeds taken from them in support of the new seeds. India is a great example. You know, a farmer signs a contract to basically forfeit their ancestral seeds so that they can grow the new genetically engineered Roundup ready soya or name your crop. And those seeds are gone when they disappear. They don't get back. And the new technology comes in, and some may be familiar with farmer suicides there. So we're not even talking about imprisonment in this case so much as people were relinquishing not only control of their seeds, but seeds that cannot be replaced in favor of purported technology that will give them superior yields, will save their family from destitution. And in one season, those seeds fail. Now the farmer's in debt hundreds of thousands of dollars for all the inputs they put into that. So it's another form of imprisonment. But there are other areas, even in Europe, it's illegal in a lot of cases to save seed in parts of Europe. So we are fortunate, and we should, I hate to use the word capitalize for its implications, but we should seize the moment that we are fortunate in the US to be able to save our own seeds without restrictions.
What about South Korea?
I can't speak to South Korea specifically. I'm not sure if anybody else on the panel can, but
When you go there, it's like everyone has a garden, no matter how small their plot.
We're gonna hold off on audience questions. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I think, no, it's cool. We can do this in a second. I just, we have like a few more questions that I want to get through. And I want to make
Anybody
sure,
else wanna say something?
yeah, I want to make sure everybody else has a chance to speak as well.
I wanted to add a little bit to, Nate, when you asked seed keeping versus seed sovereignty and why it matters. You know, we're aware of all these global problems, and we are just single people living in a community together, but think globally, act locally. Seed keeping is an act, and it's an act of empowerment, and it's an act of grabbing some of that power that is so out of balance in all of our universes right now. So seed keeping is an act that you can take, that we all can take on the road towards sovereignty, and sovereignty for everyone, not just some of us. The more of us that can take these actions together, the more our whole community, and then our region, and then our state, and our country, and our world, right? Like all these concentric layers around each of us can become connected. And so seed keeping is an act on the journey towards universal sovereignty.
Okay, I am going to switch to another question. And if you look on the sheet, if you have a sheet at your desk or table, or whatever these are, it says, what's the importance of this work on a global scale, regional scale, or to the people in this room? Instead of that question,
Oh, I like that question.
well, you'll have that question, but in a different way. Tell us a story. Tell me a story of this, right? We can talk in theoretical frames, which is great, and it's important to have that discussion. But give us a story, an example. Maybe Nataka, something you've seen or done in Boston, or something that you've seen or done in Haiti. Like, where's an example of this actually happening, tied to the importance of either global, regional, or hyperlocal?
Where what is happening? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
This work, seed sovereignty work, in any form.
I guess it's really short, and it's bringing in my husband. So one of the things that he said when he learned to grow vegetables and then be able to save seeds was that he learned how to care about people and things and the environment. And without that experience, which I believe is a fundamental part of not just sovereignty in and of itself as a, theoretical or whatever type of like how we frame it, is also, a sort of, ecology in and of itself. It's a system, right? And in each part of that, we have different experiences. Like she had the panelists, and forgive me, I've only met you guys one time, so I might not remember your name, but the beautiful lady over there, was talking about that. But so I feel like, our approach, should be multilateral. I guess that's where all of it is a priority from its most basic fundamental points of you know, folks witnessing the people in the work to the people in the work, you know, and some of those witnesses, people who witness the care that is given, then begin to care about something that they've never been exposed to before. So I just feel like, yeah, his story of how he got to care. So I think sovereignty is a matter of care and responsibility as a fundamental base of what we operate from as sovereign people and as sovereign nations and as in the act of sovereignty. So yeah, I don't know if that totally the story of it, but I feel like it's rooted in care. And, you know, hearing that from him, you know, was really just very special.
I could tell a story about Haiti.
Tell a story about Haiti.
Yeah, okay, so has anyone ever been to Haiti? You have, yeah, so they have their fair share of, what'd you say?
Just the border.
Just the border, okay. Well, they have their fair share of natural disasters and civil unrest, and what happens is when a hurricane comes through, right, all of their fields get wiped out. And then the well-meaning NGOs from the United States and all over, they say like, we're gonna go save Haiti. And they come in and they bring in huge sacks of rice that are grown in North Carolina that the farmers call Miami rice, that are given away for free to the Haitian people. So with a well-intentioned, well-meaning gesture like that, it's actually doing several things that are not good at all. And so what one of those things is like that rice is saying like, hey, I'm from North Carolina, I don't know how to grow here, right? Like we were talking about how those seeds have that intimate relationship with the soils that they're from. You could be bringing in pests, right? You could be bringing in GMOs that are going to interbreed with the endemic crops of that island. And what also happens is you're undercutting the rice farmers in the north who are like, hey, we still have rice up here, and now no one's buying it, right? So not only are you not facilitating a regenerative form of disaster relief, you're like actually hindering the entire agroeconomic system there. So the work that was done after like deep listening and going to listen and going to meet the people who were there doing the work, right? Because oftentimes disaster response is like, we know what you need, when it's like, hey, what do you need? And there's this amazing agronomist in the Southern Department of Haiti, and he has a community seed bank. That community seed bank is empty, right? Does everyone know what a community seed bank would be? A place where you could store seeds, keep them cool, dark and dry, that would be accessible, right? Not like global seed vault, let's save it for the country and the world. We're talking like community seed bank for the people. So, but those seed banks are empty. So what happens is in subsistence farming nations, if your field gets wiped out, you have, you know, a sack of your next year's seed underneath your bed, and you have to eat that because you have no food, right? And then, so how are you replanting your field? That's how you're sending your kids to school. That's how you're doing everything. So, in terms of this, like what happens is giving the agronome who oversees 25 farm managers, who then mentors thousands of smaller hold farmers, right? If you can have them have the resources to be able to safeguard their own bioregionally adapted seeds, the seeds that know how to grow well, the seeds that are palatable that they like to eat, right? When that next disaster comes through, they can immediately go to their farm managers and access seed that they can put back in their field, right? And so part of seed sovereignty, as I understand it, is having the mechanisms to be able to safeguard your, you know, your ancestral food crops and be able to multiply them and steward and caretake them to be available for times of need. And so, and just to finish on that, like, and that is funded through a female-led castor seed oil co-op, right? So they got like a cold pressed castor seed oil press. And then so without any outside influence, that becomes a self-maintaining, self-perpetuating, self-regulating system, like we all learn in permaculture, right, of disaster relief. That community seed bank runs on its own, whether or not outside influences can come back in. And then you're scaffolding up a structure that it can allow seed sovereignty to come back into a community that's been ravaged by continual civil and natural unrest. So, a Haiti story.
Good story.
And in Puerto Rico, they just burned all the GMOs after the disaster instead of bonfire.
Good job, Puerto Rico. I saw Amirah had their hand up.
Yeah, I defer to anyone who wants to go first if, as I've spoken a lot. I had an example for this, that a national example of a project that I believe is practicing seed keeping in the direction of seed sovereignty. And that example I wanted to highlight was the Heirloom Collards Project. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Heirloom Collards Project, but it started in 2016, so it's pretty recent. But the way it started is back, I think, I think maybe 2 decades ago, a couple of researchers went throughout the southeast of the United States, looking for unique collard varieties. So they knocked on doors of people throughout the Carolinas, especially, I think, and asked if they could collect seeds from families that had been stewarding these unique varieties in their families for generations. And so they went and collected, I think, over 70 different unique collards. And then they went and they put those seeds in the USDA gene bank. So they were kind of, they were cataloged, they were described, and then they were shuffled into the USDA system. But in 2016, Seed Savers Exchange, along with Ira Wallace of Southern Exposure, decided to request all of those varieties from the USDA, take them out of cold storage, and put them in the hands of farmers. So they collected most of these varieties, and then sent the seeds to farmers who wanted to become involved all over the country so that they could grow out these seeds and bring them back, help these varieties come back. They're also beginning to do work to go back and find the original farmers of these seeds, to do better documentation around their names, their stories, what they wanted these seeds to be, what they, what about these collards was special to them. And now the Heirloom Collards Project is helping make those varieties accessible again. So this is a seed system right here that is nothing like the dominant seed system. This is farmers growing seed for other farmers. And there's not even a seed company that is in between this community access, right? These are breeding projects that farmers have stewarded throughout the Southeast, and families have stewarded, that are finally coming back and being put into the hands of the people. So that's a really cool example that I wanted to highlight. I hope there are more projects like that. I grew a collard for Heirloom Collards Project this past year, and it was really wonderful to be able to connect with that seed, which was from the same area, grown by an African-American farmer in the same area of North Carolina that my family is from. I thought maybe we could be cousins. So I decided to grow that seed out for them. And now,
now that you said that, I think maybe we could be cousins too.
we could be cousins. And now, I'm hoping that seed will go from my hands, and the expansion on that genetic material that I was able to make from, a handful of seeds to several pounds of seed, will go out into the hands of other farmers, and it won't be lost.
Cool. I'm not technically on the panel, but I'm gonna highlight something. So, do you know who Paul Cuffey is? Does anyone know? Raise your hand if you know who Paul Cuffey is. Another thing we weren't taught in public education. Great. Especially if you are from this area. Paul Cuffey was a famous abolitionist and whaler from Westport and New Bedford area. He supported, I think, some of the first trips back to the African continent with people who were enslaved who escaped. And he had boats where indigenous people, Pocasset, Wampanoag, and people who were enslaved who escaped, sailing back and forth, working on these ships. His great great grandnephew is a member of the Pocasset Pokanoket Land Trust, member of the Pocasset tribe, and he's returning his family's home, which has been taken, was almost bought by a development company, and swooped in and was able to purchase it. The trees on that land were the trees used to build these boats. We're supporting his work in returning that land to its former glory. And you can go there, and there's their old house, which is crumbling now and overgrown, and there's a cedar branch across the top, and that's where they used to hang their medicinal plants to dry. And so I talked with Bill, this is a hyper-local example, about creating, once we, kind of restore some pieces, returning some of their medicinal gardens, which are still there. The great grandnephews can point out where they are still. Creating some of the indigenous, crops and plants and yeah, the corn and everything to return back, and Bill has offered to support that project. So that's another example of how if you want to get involved, you live around here, let me know. But that's another example. So
Can I add two quick things?
please do.
Okay, the time is right. First, I just want to echo again what Nataka said about the dynamic of care, because I think seed work is centered around community and is centered around not just caring for plants, but caring for one another. Farmers are, I think, by the last measurable statistics, something like a fraction of the 2% of the population, maybe something like that. Farmers and land stewards alone need solidarity to make the revolutionary changes that we need in the world. And seeds bring people together through this dynamic of care in profound ways that I'm not going to take time to rhapsodize on now, but I just am so grateful that you brought that up, and I want to just echo how important care is as a central component to seed keeping and seed sovereignty. Just one quick story about Westport too. Two quick stories, actually. We're fortunate enough to have 2 heirloom crops in Westport and in the South Coast.
We ate one for lunch.
We had one for lunch. If you had Westport's famous Macumber turnip for lunch, that is something that was brought by the brothers Macumber circa 1876 from the Philadelphia Expo to Westport and popularized. It's the genetics are arguable, but it's essentially an interspecific cross between a turnip and a rutabaga, or a very, very early iteration of the genus Brassica napus, but it is more of a rutabaga than it is a true turnip. It's a very special crop, and it grows like a weed around here. I mean, it's the poster child for regional adaptation. When we first turned our fields over, turnips were in our weed profile. That's the kind of thing that I want to be growing. And turnips, except for a very brief flirtation with seed catalogs, was maintained for 145 years by the community. Only recently has that been available in a seed catalog, which one of the local farmers after his death bequeathed his collection to the Seed Savers Exchange so that it was publicly available, because he was fearful that it would be lost with that generation. Don't get it from Seed Savers Exchange, come see us, because if you look at the picture there, it's more like a deflated football than a turnip, and it's genetic drift and things to worry about. But it's just one example of seed sovereignty, is that both that and then the corn that you see right here, which has been called Rhode Island whitecap flint corn, which is also Narragansett corn, that was originally shared and then later appropriated by colonial settlers with the Narragansett tribe, has been kept alive just like the Macumber turnip because of a community foodway. Thanksgiving, we got issues with Thanksgiving, but Macumber turnip is the turnip with turnip and carrots at Thanksgiving. It has been for hundreds of years. Johnny cake, anybody had Johnny cake before? All right, yeah, Johnny cake has become a celebrated local food tradition. It's actually not named after someone named Johnny, it's a bastardization of journey cake. So one of the things that Narragansett and the Pocasset and other tribes, when first contact happened here, did was to teach people how to cook and use the food to keep them alive. And a journey cake is something that you can cook like a cornmeal pancake and take with you on long expeditions. It has been celebrated locally ever since, controversial as it may be. But the point I'm trying to make is that the community and the foodways that were associated with these is what kept it alive. You cannot find these in a seed catalog. So just to elevate one more time, it's not exactly seed sovereignty because it has not yet spread into the community to the degree to which we'd like to see, but both of these were one generation from disappearing. And if folks like us didn't care, then they might have. There were probably 4 farmers still growing that corn besides us. And now the Narragansett tribe, because we were able to rematriate that corn after the Narragansett was able to acquire land, have land returned to them again, and have their ancestral corn grow because of a community foodway. So it's a crooked and a lot of gray area meandering of how it passed in and out of certain hands. But the fact is that it was kept alive by a community. I think that's one of the most fundamental parts about talk about seed sovereignty, is how the community keeps seeds alive.
Well, you have to, from that.
I guess it's the same story. I just told about, I had two crops in the same story. Yes.
The tale of two crops.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a good, that could be a book title that y'all write.
I just listed it from a very famous book.
But it's the best, people do that all the time. No, you put your work into that, that counts.
You can see it.
Yeah, yeah. So, what we're gonna do now is actually, we have a few more questions, but I'm gonna pause. And I'm gonna actually have the folks in the audience, I want you to turn to each other. You could turn around, you could partner, what have you, and I want you to either talk about something briefly that has come up for you and what these folks have said, or you can talk about how you see yourself doing some of this work or getting involved in this work, or maybe you already are. So we're gonna take 5 minutes for you to just do that. And then that should generate some questions and thoughts to bring back to the panelists for them to answer. I'm gonna say the last question, which is imagine a future for the last piece of this. So, okay, turn to each other, chat, y'all can turn to each other, or you can stand up and walk around.
And Nataka, did you want to look at the audience or do you? Yeah.
So I can't, I don't know, Amir, what you think?
There we
That's
go.
cool.
Should I mute this so y'all can talk and don't hear a bunch of background noise right now?
Sorry.
That is really aggressive.
It's okay. I don't get it as much as you do in terms of the sound.
Say it again.
I said, I don't get that same aggressive feedback that you're sensing or hearing. That's cool. Amir, what do you want? You want to mute or we'll keep it? Thanks.
Hey, we're gonna start in like a couple minutes. I know y'all just are sitting here waiting, but thank you for doing this. Okay.
You know.
Yeah, please pass the corner out, and we're gonna come back. So turn it back to the panelists. And finish your combo. Oh, okay, cool. Good talking. So now, does anyone have any questions or things they want to know a little bit more about from the panelists? And I'm gonna turn it over to the panelists themselves to pick some folks instead of me.
So, thank you panelists for teaching and sharing this great information. Amirah, I got to, oh no, this is for all the panelists, sorry, but I did hear Amirah at the NOVA conference in January in Worcester. And I wanted to talk about how I can break away a little bit from my admiration for the High Mowing Organic Seed Company, which has got a seed catalog that I've had great joys with kids picking out and looking at different seeds and how exciting that is to figure that out. In addition to seeds that I might have saved to bring in, not as colorfully photographed, but I bring those seeds in as well. And then hearing about the and just released this week, almost, I believe, the Ujama seed online ordering opportunities. So I'm excited to get some seeds from there too. So I guess without being sort of I don't know, overly self-journey here, how do I break away a little bit and learn more about what I think is this wonderful, High Mowing Organic Seed? It's all organic, it's terrific, it's Vermont, it's local. How do I begin to become more educated and learn more and break away from some of these things we assume? But
Is High Mowing bad? Did we miss something?
I don't know.
No, we're not here to throw out anyone under the bus.
So we love
I don't
everyone.
go there. It's all love.
It's great, but I believe there was some reference to some of the
Some of them.
appropriation of seeds,
Oh, okay.
maybe that High Mowing might be doing, or other seed companies.
Well, I
And like Seed Savers is great, but you said they've sort of done things to the McCormick turnip seed.
No, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. And we're not here to call out seed companies because I think we're in an all hands on deck moment and it's
Right,
okay.
yeah.
However,
Right, okay,
I think
right.
what I hear you putting your finger on, Johnny, is that there's a difference between our impression of what the seed catalogs give us and what actually happens behind the scenes in seed companies. And that's not unique to High Mowing. High Mowing, just like Johnny's and Fedco and others, they do extensive amounts of trials and historically have done breeding and done some growing out of seed crops. Tom Stearns at one point did a lot of seed crop growing, but it's not, they're a symptom. They're not the cause. But the cause is that there is, when you put economics first and foremost with seeds, you have to sell them. They have to be sexy. And part of that sexiness, from my perspective, is that you want to look at a seed catalog and say, wow, these people are growing all of these seeds. They're all local. And like, isn't this great? And those companies are still carrying seed from Syngenta and multinationals, even if it's organic. No, I mean, this is a problem with the industry. It's not a problem with High Mowing. So
Okay.
I think what I hear you saying
I
is like,
said corrected that.
yeah, no, well, it's not like,
Enlightened.
yeah, I hear the kernel of what you're getting at, I think, which is like, the problem is that we are led to believe that, we open this up and we're like transparent with our values and we're all following through. And in various iterations with various seed companies, that's true. But like, you can go to Amirah, you can buy seeds from Amirah in Amirah seed company, like that's as transparent as it gets.
Right.
But
With stories, great stories. So,
to say the least.
Grandmother.
And also like, Amirah is a teacher. Nataka's a teacher, Hannah's a teacher, Sefra's a teacher, I'm a teacher, like, go find classes that are happening. Seed school's a little late in Westport right now, but we're on week 3, like, just, you find yourself like brought into the move. There's so much love in the seed community, there's so much passion, and there's always infighting in every kind of group, and people have different areas of foci, but like, the point is that like, you bring yourself into those conversations, and the conversations start to have themselves. And I see this, if I can be so bold as to say it, as a natural extension of the more you get to know seeds, the more the seeds quite literally speak to you. The seeds are teaching us as much as we're teaching them. They are living being entities, and they are guiding us whether we choose to accept that paradigm or not. So just come into the circle and have a hug, and that's my 2 cents on it.
And my only response to that as well, and I didn't mean to react to that, I was just curious as to what the impetus behind
Yeah.
those comments were. Because oftentimes those catalogs don't make it clear which varieties are patented and which are open pollinated, and
It's
so.
all glossy pictures.
Right, and so that's where a lot of like the seed literacy comes in, and that's a huge part of this whole movement, is being able to like read the small print in the beginning of the seed catalogs as well too. I think that those are really great wealth and sources of information. And I don't know if, were you asking like how to source seeds more locally? Is that part of your question?
Locally, culturally sensitively, and with a greater, you said enlightenment or understanding.
Well, I just briefly, has everyone heard of the Hudson Valley Seed Company?
Say it again.
Hudson Valley Seed Company. It has those beautiful packets where they get artists to illustrate them.
Uh-huh.
So Kay Green, who runs that seed company, he came up with this really brilliant term called a seed shed, right? So we really started to understand for our food shed that we wanted to know our farmers, that we wanted to be getting our produce locally within 200 miles, 400 miles, whatever it was. Now that same conversation is really happening around seeds, especially predominantly for the past 5 years. I've been working on making truly local, genetically local native seeds available on what's known as an eco-regional scale, which the EPA made a map that overlays hydrology, geology, ornithology, all of the sciences that are important in conservation, so that we don't go off the man-made delineations of Connecticut and Massachusetts. Like when you put your bug eyes on and you fly over the landscape, you see the riparian corridors, the broadleaf forest, right? And so working along more of an ecological framework, we could start to understand, we learned our watershed, we learned about the food sheds, and so now it's time to talk about seed shed. And so the more that we are able to have seed schools and have education and build seed literacy, I've been training farmers how to grow under a USDA specialty crop block grant, how to grow the specialty crop of what's known as ecotypic or truly local native seeds. And so what that says is that with the best standards and practices that our botanists have been trained to, like, we're not sending everyone else to gather the last of this really important natural resource, but they're using the best practices to gather, and then we train the farmers to grow the ecotypic seed as a crop, teach them to collect it, clean it on things like the Winter Wizard and like the beautiful demonstration we did here. And then we started a farmer-led seed collective, and Ivory Silo Farm grows seed for it as well, eco59.com. And for the first time, organic, eco-regional, native pollinator seeds are locally available, because our entire country is under the National Seed Strategy, where they're saying we have huge issues to deal with wildfires and in terms of ecological restoration, because we're no longer in a conservation point. Like, we can't conserve things that have been denuded and destroyed. Now we need to restore them. And so the whole country is asking how we fortify these seed supply chains in the whole world. In fact, I sat on panels where networks around the world are asking these questions. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying that, like, we all participate so that we can bring in where our seed libraries are, so that we can share it and collect it and grow it and reshare it. And that builds up the strength and resilience of our communities, of our seeds, and makes for happier situations.
Yeah. And you're working with kids, brother. I mean, that's the best place to start.
And adults, hopefully.
And adults too. Yeah.
Which in terms of their seed literacy is usually.
It's parallel, yeah.
I know we probably, I'd like to hear everybody answer on this, and maybe we can do that too, but other questions?
So at the same time, they're patenting all these. So say I get really into breeding plants and I have something that's unique. Can I patent that myself? Is there some sort of anti-copyright where I could make something to where it can't be stolen by someone?
Ah.
So
Mm,
that's huge.
Amirah, I see you nodding. You want to take that
Yeah,
one
go
off?
for it. Unmute yourself here.
Someone else first.
Okay. Briefly, yes and no, I would say, from my perspective. Has been a movement known as OSSI, or Open Source Seed Initiative, which was created by some researchers at the University of Wisconsin in response to seed patenting. And the idea was to emulate within the copyleft movement in software, something that can be transmissible to seed. So it's a pledge, it's a moral code at this point, essentially. It doesn't have legal teeth. But the idea was that you were creating some standard by which somebody could apply for OSSI certification on a new variety they released. And the pledge they take is that you have the right to, one who takes the seed has the right to use it, share it, save it, breed with it, research with it, do everything but put a patent on it and its progeny ad infinitum. That's the closest thing to legal teeth there is to a counter patent. And I feel like, at least the hot air I've been taking up in the room for a minute here is focused a lot on how patents are bad, but I think patents are a tool that can also be used constructively. And what I mean by that is there was, as one example, considerations by farmers in Oaxaca who had corn that was of serious interest to corn breeders because of its, say, ability to generate and fix its own nitrogen. And they were exploring patents as a way to protect their seeds from appropriation. So we don't want to paint an image that patenting is universally bad. It's all how the tool is used, essentially. And it begs the question, you know, if you want to go down that route, even with something like OSSI, do do you want to use the master's tool to disassemble the master's house? So I don't think there's any real way to provide anything, any insurance for you to breed something. I mean, we're dealing with this now too. You know, we breed for the public domain. When that's out there, it's out there. There are going to be 1,000 golems who want to get their precious hands on a tomato we bred and then appropriate it and then use it for breeding and then put patents on it. And it's kind of just like what you have to deal with. And again, I think coming back to the community element of that, is the strength in numbers, that enough people to see it dispersed, that it's in the community no matter what. And it's tended by communities in various areas and continue to be evolved and adapted by communities. That's the best insurance I think that we have in terms of keeping seeds alive versus pursuing. There's no legal strategy that I know of to date, but always a shameless self-promotion. If anybody knows lawyers with deep pockets, you got somebody right here who's ready to take it on. We're happy to violate patents to create precedent, but I love my son and my wife, and I don't want to spend most of my life in jail, so we need people with a lot of money to take that on. Kind of long-winded. I don't know if anybody else has something to say
Amirah,
about
do you want to say something?
patenting on.
Said it better than I could.
Okay. Also, as a, we're a land trust, the Pocasset Land Trust, and land trusts have had a history of taking land, seizing land for conservation purposes. And then not allowing people to be on the land itself, and people have always been a part of the land. So as a land trust, we acquire land strictly for cultural, historical purposes, but everyone is welcome and should be able to be on that space and use that space. So you can use legal mechanisms for good, bad, in between, but they're still within the frame of late stage capitalism. Anyway, Amirah?
There is actually something I want to add, but it's not going to help you legally. I'm afraid as Bill said, there's not a ton to be done legally. But I wanted to just add that something we can do as a community of seed keepers and people who are invested in seed sovereignty work is to tell the stories of the seeds that we are carrying and that we are sharing. One of the tools that's used to separate people from their seeds is to remove the name and the story that comes along with those seeds. And over time, that link, that connection that we have to the seeds that are important to us begins to dissolve because it's no longer remembered. So if you have a seed that's important to you, that you've personally bred or that your family's been stewarding, when you give that seed to someone else, tell them the story, give them your name, and make sure that they're retelling that story every time they share that seed with someone else. If you do share it with the seed company, there are some that will honor that and some that won't, or don't share it with the seed company and just tell people just through your community that you've built, please don't share this seed. I've encountered seeds where people have explicitly asked me, please don't, I know you have a seed company, please don't commercialize this seed. And I practice respecting that. And that's something we can all do. We can respect the seeds that we're receiving from people and tell their stories well. And that helps us hold on to some community level of ownership of that seed, though it's not a legal strategy.
Does anyone else want to add to that on the panel?
I think ethics is,
Yeah.
I mean, ethics is what you carry inside yourself personally. And you either conduct yourself with honor and respect and acknowledging, the truth that you know, or you don't carry yourself that way and hide the truth that you do know. And you take actions based on how you direct yourself through your life. Restrictions exist, conservation restrictions, utility patents, PVPs, and they can be used for good and they can be used for bad. I love that you mentioned conservation restrictions because it's going through my head right now. Some land use issues, and yeah, it's a restriction. But how do you use it? Is it for good? Is it for bad? And is it with respect or not? So.
Right livelihood.
Any other questions?
do have one more, but I don't want to detract.
Well, we're like right at time,
I could
and which is rare, for me and in general. So I think that what I want to end on is you've heard a few things, I've heard a few words repeated, and one of which is return or returning and community. So the organizer in me is now going to give you a task to do. So when you go home or in this week, talk to 2 people about this, whatever you've heard, share with 2 people some information on seed sovereignty and give them an action that they can take with you, in collaboration with you, to move this forward. And maybe it's just connecting them to Amirah, and buying some seeds from Sistah Seeds or whoever, right? Or maybe it's like, let's start like thinking about how we can do this together. So that's your task. 2 people, 1 action each. Can you do that? Yes? Okay. Thumbs up. You can do that. Yes. All right, cool. Any final thoughts, remarks, from the panel?
I would just like to say one thing, if this is a topic that interests you, Rowan White, is an amazingly poetic indigenous seedkeeper. She has Sierra Seeds. She has, just written and spoken about this and rematriation in beautiful ways. And I was listening to her as I was driving up here this morning, and one of her quotes is, "When we come together to cultivate the earth and sing our seed songs on behalf of future generations, we embody the great generosity and benevolence of our own Mother Earth." So, she always says, keep singing your seed song.
And I think we'll end there. A round of applause for everybody in the room, even yourself. And people on Zoom, an extra round of applause for the Zoom. All right.
Yeah, also just as a plug, Amirah, can you kindly plug yourself and just tell them about the upcoming class that you have?
Yes.
Yes,
Please.
if y'all don't mind, I will kindly plug myself. So I wanted to first quickly put my contact information up on the board, just so if y'all don't have it. The QR code brings you to my website if you are interested in heirloom seeds from the African diaspora. The other thing I wanted to tell everyone about is if you are interested in learning seed keeping, I am part of a course that's run by Ujamaa Cooperative. We have a seed farming school, and the first course is coming up starting in March. It's called Introduction to Ethical Seed Farming, where we talk about the how-to of saving seeds, as well as delve into some of these issues around seed sovereignty and seed ethics. We have guest instructors that include Rowan White, which that is really exciting. So if you're interested in that, you can go to ujamafarms.com, and under happenings is the seed farming school. So that's all.
Everybody get that?
Thank you, guys.
Wait, Matt, will you take one picture of the panel while my name, come up here?
And while you do that,
On the Zoom.
I'll throw a plug in too, say,